In that opening there, you hear President Obama say, "I am here to facilitate a transition." Can these guys actually speak plain language? Actually, the candidate who speaks the plainest won the presidential election, that's for sure. And speaking of that, you've been hearing over the last several days, if you pay any attention, why would you, I guess, is the question, but some of you still pay some attention to old line mainstream media. That would include watching some of the old alphabet TV networks or reading some of the big newspapers around the country and hearing all of the chattering class say, oh, Donald Trump's transition team is in disarray. Well, I heard on television this morning it took 6 weeks to get Ronald Reagan's team all in place and then announce who they were going to put into the cabinet. So this wouldn't be a first. And number two, I came across this today at the Resurgent. That's Eric Erickson's website. And Erickson now says, after having been a member of Never Trump, it's time to bury the hatchet and get on board with him, which is, I guess, a good thing. Politico, he writes, has the latest, and you get the strongest hint yet that the chaos stories are all from disgruntled lobbyists suddenly denied access. In other words, the K Street folks, that is, all of the big time guys down in Washington who make money by spreading cash around, it's legalized bribery to get what they want in politics. They're not being allowed into the meetings. They're angry, so they're saying, the transition team is in disarray. And then over at the New York Times and the Washington Post, and over at CNN, MSDNC, ABC, CBS, NBC, where they just can't stand Donald Trump, they say, yes, we've heard that. Let's repeat it. The transition team is in disarray. Speaking of lobbyists, you've got a lot of foreign people. Now, they had a lot of influence with the Clinton family, and they're not at all happy about the outcome because they invested expecting something in return. You had Arabs doing it, you had the Chinese doing it, you had Latin American countries doing it, all just giving gifts to the Clintons, hoping that the Clintons would then sell off more of the United States to the rest of the world. Have any of you heard this? This is, I think, if he was still the president of that country, luckily he's not, but former Mexican President Vicente Fox issuing what is akin to a declaration of war while being interviewed over at the cable. It's called CNBC. It's the business network associated with NBC and MSDNC. He was being interviewed and he kept claiming Donald Trump is an illegitimate president.
Why is he illegitimate? He just won an election.
He would have to legitimize. He didn't win the general election, so he's got too many people against him, and they have shown out on the streets. But anyway, in Mexico, we can be rude also. As I said, we're strong now. We're going to defend our people wherever they are, in Mexico or outside of Mexico in the United States. We are not going to let this guy to offend them anymore, to offend their dignity, and more so to deny the enormous contribution they make to U.S. economy.
Well, first of all, when you count all of the illegal immigrants who were voting in California, Donald Trump, if you subtract those, Trump did win the popular vote. That's pretty clear. I mean, there are 500,000 illegal aliens living in Los Angeles alone, and if half of those showed up and voted, and then you add all of the rest who are scattered around the southwest of this country and they voted, clearly Donald Trump is the winner in both the Electoral College as well as in the popular vote. Fox says during his comments, Mexico is strong now. This echoes what we've been hearing out of China for the last 15 years. Remember when China forced down one of our airplanes just after George W. Bush took office as president, and there was a Chinaman being interviewed. Can I say, some media types say that using the phrase Chinaman is offensive. So I guess Chinese person would work. I don't know. And you can't call them Orientals. So, but he was being interviewed on TV, and his response was, he said in Brooklyn English, "Oh, China's strong." In other words, we're going to bully people around the world because we're strong now. And they've been doing it ever since. They bully their neighbors in Asia. They're bullying neighbors up and down along the Pacific Rim, at least on the what we would consider the western side of the Pacific Rim. Now you've got Vicente Fox saying, hey, Mexico is strong now. Now that all of that giant sucking sound, all of those factories that you used to have are now here, we're strong. And so therefore you better be careful. But he's not the current president of Mexico. The current president is a fellow named Nieto. And he has actually signaled his willingness to work with Donald Trump. So is this officially the Mexican government speaking? Is this a back-channel threat? Is this an ominous warning of a declaration of war? And the other part of this is we're going to protect Mexican people anywhere. Well, okay, hold on a minute. If they're no longer living in Mexico and they're permanently here illegally or in Canada illegally or elsewhere illegally, then do they remain Mexican citizens? Or even Mexican people as far as that goes? Because all of the DREAM Act people here in this country say, well, can't split families up. They're Americans now. You heard it out of Mayor de Blasio in New York City the other day. He was saying that. But if you find a familiar ring in any world leader rambling on about how we have to protect our own people anywhere, if you go back in history 75 to 80 years, there was this fellow. Now, those of you who are public school graduates, you may struggle with this, especially you liberals who were just shooting spitwads and goofing off in class. There was a fellow named Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler took over his country, Germany, and then he immediately started making demands of some of his neighbors because there were large German-speaking populations in Czechoslovakia, at a place called the Sudetenland, also in Silesia, which was shared with Poland, and in Austria. And so he said, we have to protect the German people in those countries. So he annexed Austria, then he snatched the Sudetenland, and then he invaded Poland, which launched World War II. Yet it's Fox who says that Trump is the fascist, and yet it's Fox who is using Hitler's argument about invading the United States to make the world safe for illegal immigration. It's 8:14. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Do they really believe, I guess that the drug lords have a lot of their own private armies, but do they really believe that they could take on the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Marines, and likely our U.S. Navy bombarding Veracruz, some of their other large cities? If they'd like a second Mexican-American war, maybe we can actually revive some of our own territorial ambitions. Because if you're a tourist going to Cancun or Acapulco, you always have it in the back of your mind that these drug gangs are going to kidnap you and then hold you for ransom. It's not a safe place to be. But if the United States came in there and put down the law and took over and annexed those places, and you actually had a stable government that wasn't corrupt, that wasn't incompetent, that wasn't run by a bunch of narco-terrorists, then you would have some safe cities, probably safer than Chicago, Illinois, which is filled with illegal immigrants as a sanctuary city. This may well be an opportunity to expand the United States tourist economy by absorbing those parts of Mexico in another war if Fox really would like it. This comes from Sebastian Burka. If you're a Fox News watcher, you know who this fellow is. He doesn't get invited on other networks because they don't want to hear what he has to say, but he's an author who's been writing about terrorism for a number of years. And he was appearing with Sean Hannity last night on the Fox News channel, explaining that open borders are a serious threat to the national security of the United States of America.
We associate Judicial Watch here in D.C. with the amazing work of Tom Fitton and Chris Farrell on Servergate. But Judicial Watch has also been investigating exactly how the southern border, especially a 60-mile patch between Texas and New Mexico, is being exploited by jihadists. There are reports from the local, not the feds, but the local Texas Public Safety Department. There are reports from Mexico that jihadists are using the rat runs. They're using the coyotes to bring people into the United States. There is an individual who reported that the Garland attack, you remember the attack in Garland, Texas, that was connected to jihadists in Mexico and Texas. So Sean, it's not hypothetical, it's already here. And those cities that say they're going to harbor or maintain their sanctuary status, I'd like to remind them of one thing. Donald Trump won this election mostly on a platform of law and order. Clearly, they still don't understand what happened last Tuesday in America.
Your liberal friends don't really want law and order. I just read a blog on something called Weed News the other day. Some Oregonian complaining about how he can't come and freely smoke marijuana in Idaho. I guess that means he would be, huffing and puffing and driving up and down Interstate 84 while he was higher than a kite. And The rest of us would have to deal with that. But they would like to expand the reach of the narco-terrorist state, then they can take part in all of their daily pleasures. And they feel that they could pay a little less for all of the dope that they buy from the narco-terrorists in Mexico and elsewhere in Central and South America. 817, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. If you'd like to reach our program today, the number is 736-0300. Wall Street Journal has a piece on the op-ed pages today about Denver, Colorado, where they're trying to crack down on smoking cigarettes, but they're promoting the smoking of marijuana because they like the tax revenue. They don't care about any of the medical research that says, this might not be the best thing to be promoting with people. But since it's a sacrament of the Democrat Party and all of the old hippies who now run the Democrat Party, you're not going to get a lot of traction in these Democrat Party strongholds, such as Denver or Boulder or other places, hours and hours and hours away from here. Why do they want to smoke dope in Idaho? Because they want to come up, sit on a mountaintop here or at the canyon rim, and they like to sit there and commune with nature by getting, higher than all get out, and then I guess they'll think they can fly and they'll leap off the edge, which might not be, in the long run, if you really think about it, such a bad thing. We could purge the gene pool of some of its lowest elements, as well as not have to worry about any of this discussion about majority votes and popular votes and the like for, generations to come. But I don't think they're going to do us any favors along those lines anytime soon. Just want to point out, coming up after the news at 9 o'clock this morning, Kelton Hatch is going to be in studio with us from Idaho Fish and Game. We've got a lot to talk about. As I was mentioning the other day, Kelton loves this time of year because he likes wild game on his table at Thanksgiving. I'll tell you what, whenever he talks about that, it makes my mouth water because I just love that variety that you get at a Thanksgiving Day dinner. I was thinking about that myself just the other day. I also want to point out, our program has a lot of people who make it possible on a daily basis. One of the reasons that you still have talk radio in a small city, such as Twin Falls or really across the Magic Valley, and even on the local level that you have it, is because we have folks like Waddell and Reed who help keep the lights on here in our building. They've been in business investing your money for nearly 80 years, and this is one of the oldest firms to offer mutual funds, plus they're one of the rare firms that offer two. And they're also going to make sure that your money isn't just frittered away on some pie in the sky idea that a lot of people have when they're seeking investment cash. So they have a good basis in their history and a good long track record of success of being conservative investors who won't, in fact, in the long run, waste anything that you actually invest through them. And they also do this by working with you individually. And that, I think, is the key here. They work with you individually because they know that each and every one of you is a unique individual and that you all have a different set of plans when it comes to retirement or why you're investing money in the first place. They take the planning personally. That's Waddell and Reed here in Twin Falls. 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. It's 28 this morning. Boy, isn't that a bracer when you walk outside. Makes you know that you're actually alive. There's a story this morning from AP. It says that Idaho, well, at least in the current legislative configuration, there have been more women elected to the Idaho legislature in the past, but you had more legislative seats at the time. So in the configuration change, we're now tied for the highest number of women, 31, who will serve in the legislature in the upcoming session. And then the writer, though, writing what is ostensibly a news piece, goes on to whine about the fact that women are half the population, but only have 1/5 of the legislative seats in the country. Well, I don't know how many left-handed people get elected. This is the thing. Maybe women don't run for public office as often as men do. Some of them actually still believe in the traditional roles, raising children and doing those things, or they have other concerns. Look, a lot of women that I know just don't give a hoot about politics. They want to sit down and watch The Real Housewives of New Jersey. I know. It bores the living snot out of me, but some people like that sort of thing on their television sets. Every time I hear this, because you'll hear liberals say we need to have proportional representation. We have 12 black people over here, and so we need to have representation for them. And then we have 12 left-handed people over here. Then we have 12 over here that don't know what their gender is. So we should have an equal number in the legislature. Well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that has nothing to do with what they're going to believe other than maybe their single issue. So once you get beyond that, they'll be lost, won't they? How about we just do what we always do? We have an election, and the person who wins the election goes off and serves in the legislature. It seems to me that makes a little bit more sense. Hey, if you're listening to my program, thank you very much. Telephone number to reach the show today, 736-0300, 736-0300. If you're having difficulty hearing it, though, let me just pass this along. Thanksgiving, 1 week away from today. If you're going to be at a big family gathering, but you're having trouble hearing, you may feel then that you're left out, and that can be frustrating and disappointing, and that isolation just leads, it's not healthy for you. You need to call Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. She'll help you find solutions to hearing loss and be ready to enjoy all the fun, the family gatherings and special moments with loved ones. You can schedule your hearing appointment. That telephone number, 312-0957. Again, that's Dr. Christine Pickup, 312-0957, and she reminds you life is worth hearing. It's 8:26. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. That means you can listen to us online anywhere all over the world by going to the website and clicking on the Listen Live button. Speaking of women who are running for public office, the crying fit continues. Hillary Clinton made an appearance last night and said that she was thinking about not even leaving the house. Apparently, she's been locked up there in a fetal position for days now. And there was a story yesterday that said the reason she didn't show up to concede in the wee morning hours, the morning after the election, was because she was drunk and she got out of hand and she started beating Robbie Mooker, her campaign manager, and smacked John Podesta. CNN, a reporter at CNN told that to a talk show host, and yet we don't have any video. If CNN has video, you can be assured they will not release it. Now, if this had happened at Trump headquarters, oh, we told you, look at this. We're going to play it 48 times today. Yeah, we're going to put it on the web too. But they're not going to do it with their girl. So she spoke last night, and I guess she's telling them to still go out in the streets, riot, and shoot Trump supporters and do those things they've been doing over the last week.
I know this isn't easy. I know that over the past week, a lot of people have asked themselves whether America is the country we thought it was. The divisions laid bare by this election run deep. But please listen to me when I say this. America is worth it. Our children are worth it. Believe in our country, fight for our values, and never, ever give up.
No, gosh. Yes, go out there and beg for more free stuff from the government. I won't be with you any longer. The party is disgusted with me, but there'll be somebody else that comes along and plays Santa Claus. Meanwhile, is she guilty? Well, check this out. This is from Jesse Jackson. I want you to hear what he's saying and then ask yourself, would he say this if she wasn't guilty?
President Obama should follow President Ford's example and offer a preemptive full pardon and inoculation against politically motivated prosecution in the spirit of healing the divisions in our country. To do otherwise will only exacerbate divisions and harden feelings on both sides. It would be a monumental moral and political mistake to pursue the prosecution of Hillary Clinton.
And I'd just like you to know, I didn't like it when Jerry Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. But, gosh, we should be pardoning Hillary Clinton because, well, she is guilty, but we wouldn't want that disturbing the country for the next several years while she walked the plank along with all of the other folks who are trying to sell America down the river. 8:29, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Remember, Donald Trump was asked on 60 Minutes to denounce hateful speech from the right. Well, I got this from the Daily Caller. Matt Harrigan, president and CEO of Packet Sled, stepped down Monday after he threatened to assassinate the president-elect. Quote, "I'm going to kill the president-elect. Nope, getting a sniper rifle and perching myself where it counts. Find a bedroom in the White House that suits you, you mother blank. I'll find you," unquote. And then he went on to post another screed, quote, "In no uncertain terms, blank you, America. Seriously, blank off," unquote. Harrigan offered to step down Monday, and Packet Sled accepted his offer. Oh, and also a guy in Atlanta who told a Latino fellow, that he had voted for Trump. The Latino shot and killed the Trump voter. But you know, the media and the Democrats, that's okay because you're all a bunch of deplorables and we have to rid the planet of your kind. No apology. 27 right now. We've got more on this subject coming up in a few minutes on KLIX. We got a couple of follow-up mentions to our conversation yesterday with Congressman Raul Labrador, and I want to get to those in just a moment. A couple of things he mentioned. We've got some developments related to those that transpired. I know that's a big word. I don't use that in normal conversation. That happened following our conversation with him. He went back into session and some closed-door meetings, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. 8:34, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Did you get to test the heat out a little last night at home? I did. Clicked it on, and it worked just fine. But if it's not working fine for you, we need to point out that you need to give a call to the professionals who will take care of this and get things done right and get done right the first time when it comes to repairs. Ramsey Heating and Electric in Burley. In fact, they'll do that job quickly. They'll do it efficiently. They'll give you problem-free cozy winters. You can find those at Ramsey Heating and Electric. Telephone number, 678-0459. Also located, if you're in the neighborhood, at 2600 Overland Avenue. To stop in and say hello to them and tell them what you need. That's 678-0459, Ramsey Heating and Electric, where they sell warm winters and cool summers. Congressman Labrador said yesterday, I asked him about earmarks. There was going to be a vote yesterday on restoring earmarks to the House of Representatives. Now, what do we mean by earmarks? Maybe that needs a little explanation. Pork barrel spending. Back in the mid to late 2000s, that is, in the previous decade, about $30 billion a year was being spent on these things. And essentially, it's a guy goes back to his home district or a woman and says, well, I fought for you. I've got this big satchel of money. I had to get down on the floor and wrestle them for it, but I learned them, and I learned them good. And if you send me back to Washington for another 2 years, I'll learn them again. And this is how they get reelected. But what they don't explain to you is there's just a big sack of this, and they give it out to every loyal party soldier so the loyal party soldier can get reelected. And as we spend the country into oblivion, a lot of people say, well, Bill, it's just $30 billion. You know, when my daughter was little and we'd be going shopping on a Saturday, she'd want to stop at KB Toy and Hobby. It was one of the first long strings of words she ever learned. And I'd say, well, money's a little tight. But it's only going to cost $5, she would say. Well, the next day, but Dad, I want this, and it's only going to cost $5. I had to explain to her, every time you spend $5, it ends up being real money if you do it a lot. So House Republicans, John Boehner, of all people, who was the man who put an end to this. Did you know that? He put an end to this type of spending when he took over as majority leader, or speaker rather, of the House of Representatives. And he's gone, but Paul Ryan is trying to maintain that. They had a discussion behind a closed door yesterday, and Paul Ryan told the guys who would like to be involved with hijacking our Treasury once more that he wasn't going to have a vote on it until next year. A writer at the Daily Signal says Republicans are going to be debating earmarks then at the same time. President-elect Donald Trump is trying to enact his 100-day agenda, which includes a promise to drain the swamp. The four proponents, and give Paul Ryan credit, he made sure that their efforts to do this, the leaders of this effort to blow your money on getting themselves reelected every 2 years, he decided to make sure their names went public. They are, and they're Republicans, John Culberson of Texas, Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania, who may as well be a Democrat, Mike Rogers of Alabama, and Tom Rooney of Florida. And so there won't be a vote anytime soon on this. They have it delayed, but it will come up again after New Year's Day. This could be the first big battle Donald Trump has with those so-called conservative Republicans who always talk about reducing spending until it comes to benefiting themselves. And then, of course, hey, spend it if you got it, right? And then I've got this as well from the same Daily Signal today. Conservatives say, and remember when media says conservatives, that's a big, broad brush. It can mean a lot of different things. Conservatives say they can be natural allies to Trump, who will be a bridge to Republican leadership in the White House in order to pass contested legislation. But conservatives also promise to be a check against the future president if his plans veer far from their fiscally austere principles and if Trump makes heavy use of executive actions. And this goes back to our conversation yesterday. Here's a quote from Representative Labrador. He said the same thing pretty much on our program. Quote, he is going to come here with some proposals, and we will agree with some proposals and disagree on other proposals, unquote. So, in other words, they're not going to let him run this as a Caesar. He's just president. Look, folks, I know you're familiar with my clock because it's the same breaks, same time every day, and I apologize, but I've got, if I would be unfair to grab a caller right now because I'm 20 seconds away from a break. But if you're inclined, please give me a call on the other side of the break. I invite telephone calls during the course of the program. You don't have to sit on your hands or sit on your phone. Right now, though, 8:40, it's 30. Oh, 30 feels pretty good all of a sudden. It's 30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And if I could mention it, Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game, one of my favorite guests, going to be with us. See, if I said he was my favorite guest, then everybody else out there who's a guest on the program might get their noses bent out of joint. We wouldn't want that because then they'd have to go to their safe spaces, and you know how that works. I just was checking a quick bulletin from the Hill newspaper. House Republicans, and since they dominate the House, have put together a short-term budget which will run through March so they don't have to negotiate a deal with President Obama. They'll be working with the new president instead. God bless them. Once in a great while, these guys will actually do something that's right. On the other hand, we don't know what's in that short-term budget. Well, here's a little for you, here's a little for me, and but we'll be hopeful until we actually see the details. Got to mention our good friends from Tripp Family Medicine are going to be in studio with us in just a few days again. Dr. Tripp was here yesterday talking about the benefits of walking. Sometimes even short walks once every hour in the workplace, and what these 5-minute walks can mean for your health. And a wonderful topic. They can help prevent heart disease, cancer, any other, in fact, even break down some of the fat in your gut that oftentimes comes from just sitting. Research shows that just sitting sometimes helps those fat cells grow. It has nothing to do with what you're eating or drinking at the particular time. We'll do this all over again next Wednesday morning between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. Better health with Tripp Family Medicine. They like to remind you life's too short not to feel good. Dr. Tripp's office still looking for new patients, and they'll often see patients, often being the operative word, on the very same day. If you call with an emergency or you have something that's really dogging you, they'll try and get you in by that afternoon, and if not, the next day, and make sure that you're okay, or if not, give you some advice on where to go next. And no, they don't tell you where to go there. They're good people over at Tripp Family Medicine, located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office right here in Twin Falls, Idaho. 736-0300. That's the telephone number to reach Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're on the air. You're up next.
You know, there was Senator Everett Dirksen years ago. He said, you know, a billion
from Illinois, right? From Illinois.
Yeah, from Illinois, no less, yeah. He said, you know, there's a billion here and a billion there, and pretty soon you're talking about some real money, you know, and I still remember that. And no, it's a trillion here and a trillion there, which is 1,000 billion, of course. But all of these, our government, our state government, it does not run on a balanced budget. I'm sorry, but we get about a third of our state revenue comes from the federal government. And I'm sure most of the other states, California and especially in New York and a lot of these real liberal states, I mean, big percentage of their money, and that's why the federal debt is going up astronomically as we speak, is because then you get all these grants to the cities to put in bike paths or whatever to help you out with the arsenic in your water. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And folks, the solution to these problems is to get back to the original intent of the Constitution, where federal government is very limited in what they could do, where the people or the federal government is the servant, not the master. And we see that so evident. You know, see all of these extortion if you don't put in the arsenic, the EPA is going to fine you. And we also have a culture now where the agencies, of course, you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. That's totally un-American with these agencies, and that's one of the big problems we have. We've got to turn that around so that the agencies don't come out and just fine you thousands of dollars. You spend your livelihood defending yourself against all of the government-paid lawyers. It's happening, and it's been happening for so long, and I'm hopeful Trump will turn that around when he gets elected and void a lot of these war on coal and all this other stuff that's been going on by the EPA through the UN, no less, which is where most of these programs are coming through, like Agenda 21. We're redistributing our wealth to these, undeveloped countries through this global climate change nonsense, which, of course, is just a hoax.
And I thank you much for the call. And we should point out, too, that redistribution of this, our own money, our own national treasure, going to a lot of people who don't like us. Caller also brings up a point. The trails that they have developed here in Twin Falls, and probably in various parts of Idaho, are beautiful. I don't doubt that. And they have their place. But yesterday, I went for a walk on Tuesday when it was in the low to mid-70s on the trail, and close enough to home I could go out for a long walk on the trail along the canyon rim. And I think I saw 2 other people, maybe 3, who were walking the trail that warm afternoon. So the temperature dropped by about 30 degrees yesterday, so all I had to do was put on a thermal shirt over my other shirt and then pull a hooded sweatshirt over that, put on some gloves and a hat. And I went out for another long walk on the trail. I didn't even see a bird or a gopher out there yesterday, much less another human being. So you ask yourself, all that money that's spent on these, and I know it's beautiful. I mean, it's lovely. But quality of life, Bill, well, what are we paying for quality of life? What would my quality of life be if I didn't have to fork over all of this money for these sorts of things? Maybe individually people would be willing to put together these things. There's certainly enough restaurants and businesses now along that canyon rim. Maybe they'd be doing it on their own because it would be an attraction for their customers. But they don't have to do it because somebody else comes in and lays it down for them at taxpayer expense. I throw that out there as an example of what our caller may have been referencing there, and I think I'm pretty much on the level with him as far as what his thinking process was. Telephone number, if you'd like to reach our program today, is 736-0300. That's 736-0300. And one of the reasons I'm out walking is because it's good for my health. Just like the doctor said yesterday, it's also a great way if you're trying to lose weight. You get a little exercise, but it's not going to be too difficult on your old joints. It's not like running and skydiving and some of those other things that might be considered a little dangerous. I want to talk about losing weight in just a couple of minutes, and I'll tell you how you can go about. I've dropped well over 40 pounds, and I want to tell you how you can go about doing that and how it can happen quickly, but still safely in your life. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a point, and then I'll hang up. We get the Voice here in Burley, the Weekly Mailer, and there was an article in there on Tuesday about from a Democratic chairman leader, I think it was for the state of Idaho. Anyway, one of his points in there was that he said that he put down that people were keeping younger kids from voting, and then another point he put out in there was about older people, grandmas being harassed not to vote. Did you hear anything about that?
No, and I think it's just more malarkey from the Democrats because they want to claim. I saw a good story about that this morning. They keep claiming that it's gerrymandering, or it's the Electoral College, or it's the fact that somebody wasn't allowed to vote. People are outside the polling place tackling them and wrestling them down and then beating on them until they leave, whatever. They can never admit it's their own failed policies. I hope that answers the question. You're up next. You're on the air on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. Your caller just before the last caller, I think the easiest way to say what he was trying to say is glass house. We cannot keep complaining that the federal government doesn't balance its budget when we don't balance our own and live on our own. You know, we're famous, all of us, the human race is famous for getting up in the morning, looking in the mirror and blaming someone else. I mean, we see it more so with the Democratic Party than anything else. But until we get out of the thumb of the federal government, we cannot tell the federal government where to go.
Wouldn't it be nice to tell them where to go? But then
well, if we weren't under their thumb where they say, well, if you don't do this, we're going to take away your money, then we couldn't we?
I thank you for the call. Remember, Randy Weaver told them where to go, and look what happened to him. And all he was doing was living alone on a hilltop and apparently bothering no one, but still, they had to come along and mess with him. What, is that some sort of example? 8:51, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I'm referencing a piece by T. Beckett Adams in the Washington Examiner. In wake of Clinton's loss, media says the system is rigged after all. And I mentioned that. They claim, it's gerrymandering. Well, when you lose a Senate seat, that's an entire statewide vote. Gerrymandering had nothing to do with it. When you lose the governorship, that's a statewide vote. And Democrats keep losing governorships across the country. So that's got nothing to do with gerrymandering. So then they say it's the Electoral College. Well, you look at that electoral map, and like 10 counties in the United States would make Hillary Clinton president and I said it the other day, if you're looking for California to run the country, and the California governor then may just as well be the emperor, then go ahead and eliminate the Electoral College. But the rest of the country isn't going to be happy or comfortable with that. And we also, I think, are all pretty well aware that if illegal immigrants are voting and felons are voting, then it really isn't a fair election, even if it is the popular vote. So they've got all of these arguments, and then, Trump appealed to racism, and everything they come out with is just such a bunch of malarkey. Maybe people don't like socialism. These responses, the writer says, to political defeat mirror the media's larger tendency to blame electoral losses on supposedly unfair rules and tricky politicking. Quote, it's not our ideas that lost, unquote, they say. Quote, if it weren't for this one rule or it weren't for this obscure election law, we surely would have won, unquote, they argue. And there was a lot of this attitude today following Hillary Clinton's stunning defeat. In other words, it can't be them because everybody wants to force a baker to cater a homosexual wedding. Everybody wants to be a homosexual. Everyone wants to be a cross-dresser. Everyone wants to go into the little girls' room, all the grown men do, and pee next to the little girls. Golly gee, don't you understand that? Everybody wants to stamp out the coal industry and then have the people who used to mine coal using food stamps. In fact, coal miners want to use food stamps and live in squalor. Good golly, don't you know that? You Republicans, you cheated. Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Thank you for joining me this morning. Coming up on 8:54, it's 30. Kelton Hatch will be joining us from Idaho Fish and Game in a few minutes. You can't cheat when it comes to losing weight. There are only two ways to do it. My endocrinologist once said to me, she said, exercise is good, but when it really comes down to it, you got to eat less. Well, there are ways around that too, because if you eat less, sometimes you're hungry. Let me tell you about the Total Body Transformation System. I have been using it. It does not make me hungry. I have been losing weight. And I lost the first bucket of weight, nearly 36 pounds. I guess it was 36 pounds without doing much exercise at all. And then I decided to ramp up the exercise because now that I've lost the weight, it's gotten easier to actually get out and do the exercise. It's not a fad diet. It's been around for over 2 decades. This is a diet that has been scientifically proven to work and approved by medical professionals. It has had some great reviews from medical professionals at some of the nation's largest universities, Tufts, Cornell, Columbia, and many others. It is a system that has been awarded 2 patents. It'll reduce your waist circumference, and the other patent for increasing metabolic rate and weight control. You'll burn 6 times more fat and lose 6 or 8 times more weight than normal results from diet and exercise alone. And the average person using the Total Body Transformation System will lose 22 pounds. Now, I've been telling you all about this. I wasn't the first person here in Twin Falls to catch on to this. you need to call marketing executive Don Chandler. Many of you know Don. He used to own the tuxedo shop. He lost 50 pounds. He looks great. He looks like a new man. His telephone number, of course, area code 208-731-3560. And then you can learn how this amazing system works. Once again, Don's telephone number, 208-731-3560. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air at 8:55 on KLIX.
Good morning. This is Pat.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I just think that the biggest problem with the Democrats is they have brainwashed the American public to believing that no Republican could ever be elected without giving amnesty to the trespassers, and it's just blew it clear out of the window because we got it accomplished without doing those things that they've been predicting that would have to be done.
Well, you know, Vicente Fox is going to be leading that drug dealer army across the border to teach Trump a lesson, so I guess we should all be quaking in our shoes.
So anyway, well, have a nice day, Bill.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the call, Pat. Good hearing from you. I got to talk to Pat at the county fair, of course, a couple of months ago, and I got to meet a lot of people, Danny and some of the others who are regular listeners of the program, and they really make you proud to be a good conservative and call Idaho home when you meet people like that. But Dan, by the way, used to be a North Dakotan, which is a lot like Idaho, and I want to mention this quickly. He commented on something on my Facebook page last night, sayanythingblog.com, which is a conservative to libertarian blog out of North Dakota, has been following this story, and I wanted to squeeze this in because we might not get to it otherwise this week. This group that's protesting the new pipeline in North Dakota and has been blocking access with the approval, of course, of President Obama, even though everything else is in order on it. It's not harming anyone. It wouldn't harm anyone. Well, weather in North Dakota is taking a turn for the worse. You could have, the writer says, some frozen liberals who will not be able to demonstrate any longer because as ice blocks, they won't be able to move. And he says a lot of these people, they're outsiders. They're not from there. They have no idea. They're living in tents with little cooking stoves and heating stoves, and he says it won't be long before some of them end up as crispy critters as well. Funny how that works. And he also goes on to write in the very same publication, green energy companies are funding the protests. Why? Because, well, they've been giving money to the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. By doing so, it makes it look like the Sioux are out there fighting for their traditional rights. But on the other hand, it means that if they block the pipeline, then all of these people who are getting your tax dollars for solar subsidies and the like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, look at the money we're going to make. And the Indians will get screwed in the long run as usual. We've got a break for news from Fox coming up in just a moment. Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game scheduled to join us on the other side. It's 8:59. It's 29. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com.